toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. Welcome, everyone, to our 5th of 6 classes on the Imaginal faculty of the soul. And as I had promised last time, I'm going to have quite a bit of background of my own life in terms of how I use the Imaginal faculty in simple ways in my life. And I hope you'll be able to identify with a lot of the things that I'm talking about. And Azarbash has some wonderful things to share also. In fact, I'm going to begin with something that he shared with me that made all the difference. And that was, he thought about the Imaginal faculty, and that somebody had asked a question about, well, is this the same as Alam al-Mital? Is this the same as Herkalia? What are we speaking about here? And we really talked a lot about that during this week. And what came forward for me was that really the imaginal faculty, or the imagination, is part of the subtle realm, but it is something that we are in touch with. So in a way, we are in that truncated situation, but we really can enter into and reach into the more subtle. So it is that middle realm. And you could think of it as a ladder between the normal, quote unquote, way of thinking about things and being in the place where it all happens, in, I was saying, the subtle realms. So in between places, that is where we can make a difference. This is where we can do things in order to make the subtle realm seem closer. It is a ladder. So here's a part of a ladder that we could speak about. How can we use our imaginal faculty as a ladder? And so I brought even some things for you to look at. My grandparents. So this is a picture that I have to look at. And what it does is help me to feel closer to beings. Well, feeling very close to beings is what would the subtle realm would be like, that everyone is close to everyone else. And we have this intermingling, and everything is beauty upon beauty, and wisdom upon wisdom, everything being shared with everything. But this is one way of making an overture toward that, and keeping a practice of having pictures in our home about beings that we love. And I bet you everybody has this one, and it moves and works in our own ways. How about cards that someone had given you that remind you of those beings and bring them closer? Brings you closer to that feeling you had when you maybe had a present given to you, how you love this person in your heart. These are using the imaginal faculty. Some of you all even know that I've written a piece of music to these little basil plants. So we have our pets, we have our plants that we love so much, and that having those in our world is very much a part of using our imaginal faculties, using our imaginations, bringing ourselves a little bit closer to the subtle realms. So there are many things that we do in order to activate these kind of relationships. When I grew up, I thought of when I did cleaning in the house, I was close to Mary, Mother Mary, in my Catholic upbringing. And so every time I cleaned a table or vacuumed, I felt that I was touching the body of that sweet beloved one, and that I was having great contact in that way. So there's some ways of being connected to the inner realms through our own activity and our own imaginations. And it doesn't have to be something that hangs on the wall of a museum. This is about our own lives. Would you like to enter in?
Yeah. So we've been talking about the idea of hotspots, and these are things in our normal waking world that can potentially be something that opens us up into that much richer state of being. And so Hazrat Khan talks about there's only one sacred scripture, and the leaves of the trees are the pages of that scripture. Well, we can even generalize that some more and say everything that we experience is a page of that scripture, but it all has to do with our perception of it and our relationship to it and our way of connecting with it. And I've said this many times, but it's such an important point. All of those very situations and people that we don't like, and wish would go away, and wish weren't present, and we perceive as obstacles to our spiritual unfoldment, are exactly the very means of our awakening and transformation. And so there's like the golden opportunity. It's like if you were to go to an internet cafe and you wanted to hook your device up to the internet, you'd have to have a password. Otherwise, you could know that there was broadband internet there, but it wouldn't do you any good. So all of these potential hotspots in our day-to-day life, what's the passcode? Well, the passcode is the realization that something can come through and emerge from the light of our being in connection with the light of whatever it is that we're experiencing. And each side is having a transformational effect on the other side. So from one level, working with the imaginal faculty, and we have to start where we're at. So from this level, we're in a certain state of being, and we're using this imaginal faculty to envision something different from our normal realm. And there can be different degrees of this. I mean, we could imagine something ordinary, like there's an apple in the refrigerator. Well, it's not particularly dramatic or earth-shaking. We can imagine things, we tend to imagine things that we already have a basis of knowledge about or understanding. And we tend to do this even in our spiritual practices. So if we're working with an inner landscape, we have something that sets the stage, we have an image that goes with it. And that's very useful and important. But if we limit ourselves to that, then we're not going to really have an actual experience of a connection with that deeper level of our being. Because just like Rabani Ra was talking about, we tend to live in a truncated state of being. We can be in a truncated state of the imaginal faculty, which is limited by what we think is possible or what could be or what's supposed to be, and rejecting anything that doesn't fit in. And what's tricky is that rejection is not necessarily conscious. It can just be automatic. Well, we just don't even see that. We don't perceive it. So we have to be open to something that's different than what we thought. And a little bit more about this. We've talked many times about fana, shattering, and baka, rebirth or resurrection. And we've talked about, in terms of our station, kind of a broad way of being, that as we grow, that breaks down and we are in an in-between state. And that's true. But in working with the imaginal faculty, there has to be a fana of our usual mode of perception and conception, because if there isn't that, nothing is going to arise that's going to really be a breakthrough or is going to be something new.
Yeah, so let's go back to what I was sharing earlier, let's say about a picture of someone who's dear to me. So this is not anything new to us, and probably everybody in the world has this kind of feeling that they want to have this being closer to them, and so they have a picture of them. But what is different about it now is that we see ourselves as being different. We see ourselves as um, being able to enter in to all the realms, so that this connection is made in it's begun in this truncated situation, but then as we realize, who is it that is perceiving? Who is it that we are perceiving in the picture? And as we allow those things to unfold and unfold, then we are connecting up all those realms with the manifest through our own being, because now we're realizing what is the fabric of what we are made. I like to think of it as Varna, as the light of being. But if we realize that at the same time as saying, oh, I am the granddaughter of these beings right here, then we're not limited to that experience. Just living into some of what you're talking about?
Well, I want to add something to this. So it's a common and very wonderful practice to tune into a master or a saint or a prophet that we feel an affinity to. And that can oftentimes start with a picture, an image that we're familiar with, but it also can start with just our historical knowledge of that being. And we tend to imagine tuning into that being the way that he or she was at a particular point in history. And Birbalai would always talk about tune into the cosmic nature of a being when you do that, because that being is no longer their historical persona. They have a cosmic aspect to them, which is becoming and evolving. And so once again, we're opening to a way of connecting with something that we don't have a preconception of what it's supposed to be. And now there's many more possibilities available. We still have steps we have to go through. Rabani Ra was talking about building that scaffolding between our normal state and what we're experiencing, because we've talked many times about the necessity of undergoing a radical transformation in our frame of reference, our vantage point. And that requires us to be able to open to states of being, states of consciousness, states of vibration, you could say, which are very different from the one that we're most familiar with, our manifest state. But then we have to be able to build a connection between that experience, which is a part of ourself, which does exist right now, no place but here. But we can come to experience something that bridges the usual frame of reference with that very different state of being. And we do that through so many different ways. We do it through metaphor. We do it through imagery. We do it through perhaps the perception of sound. And the mystics describe all these different subtle sounds that are associated with higher states of consciousness. We do it with a perception of different forms of light. We do it with the perception of different forms of energy, even happening in different locations in our body, which we associate with either the chakra system in yoga, or the Sufis talk about the Lata'if, which are similar but not quite the same. And these are correspond to different vibrational states of being that are all parts of who we are. And first we have to awaken to them to be able to function on that level of vibration. And our imaginal faculty is a necessity in order to be able to do that. But that would not be of much utility if we weren't able to integrate that with our sense of ourself as a unitive being. So that's what we're really aiming for. We're using the imaginal faculty almost as the what is weaving through a loom of the tapestry of our soul, and it's creating a patterning by which we can experience through the wholeness of ourself rather than just through one part or a different part.
Well, I think I can build upon that just from my own experience in life and what has grown in me and continues to act. For example, my familiarity with different types of art and creating things, which for a while I really wanted to just see how many possible ways there were to work with these. And now after a while, I'm perceiving that these things that I'm creating actually delight me in different ways. So I'm using them as I create pieces of stationery so that I can work from the joys that came through the art, bringing that to writing something. So it's almost like I'm being the witness in the heavens, watching this being here and seeing what it is that she requires. The compassionate witness, I've called that before, that we can be acting from many different planes or different frames of being. Those beings who love you, those beings who protect you, and activate them somehow through your own imagination, so that you begin to feel this circulating, this united feeling that Azurbash is speaking about.
So last time we talked about navigation, navigating through different states of being. And this is an important part of working with the imaginal faculty. Moving towards a particular desire to discover something is a very common one. It could be discover something that's related to a form of art or music or poetry or knowledge about whatever field we're involved in, whether it's science or it could be so many different things. And we're opening towards something that's different from acquired knowledge. We have our basis of what we know, and we tend to just hunt around in the pool of what we're familiar with. It's like that Nasruddin story where he's hunting for his key by the lamppost, and they ask him, "Where did you lose your key?" And he says, "Over there in that dark alley." And he says, "Why are you looking for it here by this lamppost?" He says, "The light's better here." That's what we tend to do with our imaginal faculty. We look where the light is better, and what that means is what we've known. And if we can kind of harness some of that pioneer, adventuresome spirit that we'd like to discover and explore something that isn't known to us, that perhaps hasn't been known to anyone, it's awaiting a discovery. And like even Arby said, there's some wisdom that can only come through each one of us. And so we're opening to that. So we can mix in the idea of desire with our imaginal faculty, directions of desire, our desire. I would like to have an inspiration about some work I'm involved in. I would like to have an understanding of something that I'm puzzling over. I would like to see how, I mean, for myself, I've so many times sit with a question, and it could be, I would like to discover how this, something that's been recently discovered in science applies to spirituality. And so I'll just put kind of that basic thought in there and just let it germinate without trying to determine what's going to be. And many times something very surprising will come back that I could have never thought of on my own from my end of things with what I've known before. It just, what was needed for the answer to that question is not available in my data banks of what I have, but there is a cosmic data bank that is opened by a relationship with it that we can tap into. So that's one direction, what we're wanting to discover. But there's another direction that probably we haven't thought so much about, and it's the divine side of things, desire to discover something through us. We've talked many times about the Sufis say creation began because the divine was a hidden treasure desiring to be known. And that wasn't just this one generic thing, okay, existence, you know, I'll know who I am by existence. It's a particular desire for every single being in existence, in every single realm of existence, which includes every one of us. So we have this ishq on our end for discovering something through the imaginal faculty of our soul, but the divine aspect of our being has a similar desire for discovering something that can only come by linking up of the two sides, enabling a means of communication, and not communication in the usual sense of words going back and forth, but something that can be perceivable, that we can bring back from that through whatever means is natural to us. And that's why in the scriptures, I mean, it's almost always brought back in song, in poetry, in parable, in metaphor. So and so is like such and such, because it's impossible by definition to put into words something that's transcendent. It doesn't fit into limitation. But just like we've talked about discovering the fractal nature of the whole by exploring our own fractal neighborhood, we can get an understanding of what it's about, and we can bring something back from that. And so it might be something that we produce in a creative work that someone has an experience of when they see that work. It could be a teaching that we find a way of communicating, but the teaching itself is just a means of whoever we're sharing it with to be able to connect with us, to be able to tap into the experience that we're trying to describe, which is beyond words. It's the conduit that enables that to take place. Once again, you could say through the imaginal faculty of each of us, the way that we are able to link up with each other.
So I think that it'd be good to do a practice then based on these ideas. And we're going to do two of the divine names that we used last time. One of them being Mawjud, which means making God a reality, which is very much what we're speaking about here. And the other being Fatah. Fatah is an expression that actually Christ used this in his healings. When he healed the blind man, he said, and it's written in the Bible, something like Fatah or something like that, unusual, but the way that it is said in Arabic is Fatah, F-A-T-A-H, and Mawjud was M-A-W-J-U-D. Fatah really means open the door. And Azerbaij reminded me that's also a very good way of thinking about opening the hot spots, finding that hot spot, finding that place where the energy is zinging, is pouring forth from the subtle realms. So we're working with these two. Again, back to Mawjud, the idea of making God a reality. So what is this? So let's talk about it back and forth a little bit here. So one way of thinking of it that is so a reality. So we're bringing the idea of the subtle into the manifest, and not only that, but remembering that all of it is this relational unity that we're speaking about before. That it is all the divine coming into life, going back to the other side, going from one level to the next, in the Wazaif, no, excuse me, in the Lataif. It's a circulation of the divinity. So that's another way to talk about that.
Well, I wanted to add something on related to that, but also to what I said earlier about the desire on the divine side for the discovery that we're having on our side. And I just had this thought recently. We could consider really all of the scriptures, and especially the principles that in these scriptures are coming from the divine for the humans to live by. They're different ones in different traditions. I mean, anywhere from the 10 Commandments to love thy neighbor as thyself and so on. But we could think of these as the divine's instruction instructions to humanity of what human beings need to do in order to fulfill their part of what the divine needs from them in order to fulfill the divine's desire for what is wanting to come through. So instead of thinking of it just in terms of, okay, these are good ways to live, and if you do this, you're going to come back to God. What if you think about it as, well, this is God's kind of manual that's updated throughout history and the different traditions and the different messengers for what God's need is for humans at that state of evolution to do in order to further that connection even more, so that, as the Sufis say, purpose of life is to make God a reality. So I'll come back to the answer to this question, another way of thinking about Mawjud. And that means to, in the language, for those of you who've been in the many previous series of talking about the resurrection body, it means awakening to the resurrection body, which is the fulfillment of our human divine nature. And living in the resurrection body, all of life is the divine in relationship with the divine. It is anyway, but we're not awake to it. You know, we have glimpses of it. But in this state, everything is the reality. It's kind of hard to find the right words, but everything is the reality of what it truly is. So instead of Tawil, we're seeing that which transpires behind that which appears. Everything is the full expression of its own divinity, revealing itself to every other full expression of its own divinity. So here's the big kahuna description of what Mawjud is.
And maybe I could say Mawjud is making God a revelation upon a revelation, continually revealing God's self. So that would be a beautiful beginning, at least, for your meditation. And then Fatah is being opening the door, completely opening the door to the complete circulation of all of it. So we're going to first do it as Ya Mawjud, Ya Fatah. We'll say that for a while, and then we'll do the breathing practice, and I'll guide you in how to do that. So listen 3 times of this, and then please join in when I ask you to. Ya Mawjud, Ya Fatah. Ya Mawjud, Ya Fatah. Ya Mawjud, Ya Fatah. Now join in. Ya Mawjud, Ya Fatah. 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 One more. Ya Mawjud, Ya Fatah. Now, as a breathing practice, these are both done as an exhale. So the way that we can do that is we'll think Mawjud as we exhale, and then we'll just inhale without any thought. And then we'll think Fatah as we exhale, and then we inhale. So it would be like this. So now I'm going to say I'm going to say Mawjud as I'm exhaling. You just watch me for a minute. Now as I inhale, I'm just inhaling. Now as I exhale, I'm thinking Fatah. And now I inhale. Okay, so here we go. Well, don't hear anybody saying anything, but you will be hearing yourself saying Mawjud each time, the first time as you exhale, and then Fatah as you exhale the next time. Let's begin. And pause for a minute. We'll continue. And as you say these, remember that there's this great circulation every time you are saying it. And perhaps every time you do, you'll feel more circulation and more of the manifestation of the divine and more of this opening of all the hot spots. Let's continue. Let's pause again. And as we continue, feel how the divine is experiencing this practice as you are, and feeling every time that you say the practice that there is a change in the divine being. Everything is influencing each other. So again now Jude and Bata. Okay, now we won't be saying any words even internally. We'll just feel the essence of the practice as we breathe. Amen.
So let's explore more with our imaginal faculty. We could say there's different arenas in which we can exercise this faculty. And usually we think of it just towards some specific thing related to what we're doing in our current life. But because we are beings that exist beyond this particular point in time, we have an existence in the past, we have an existence in the future, we have an existence even beyond time, before this life, after this life, and so on. We can use our imaginal faculty to help us modulate our consciousness in different aspects of our temporal and atemporal existence. So that's what we're going to kind of set the dial on for. So if we had a click down menu for imaginal faculty, imagine it has all these different icons you can click on, and one is like artistic creativity, musical inspiration, understanding, and so on. But here's one, temporal exploration. So we're going to click on that one. So close your eyes and think back to an early childhood memory, maybe the earliest age that you can recall. And at first, it's going to just seem like here you are, going through the memory banks of your mind and pulling up the file for that particular age. But you have the capability to open to experiencing what the world was like in that state of being at that particular age. So see if you can give yourself a license to be able to do this. So just open up to what the world was like at that particular age. How you experienced what you saw in nature. people. Maybe you had beliefs in magic, that you could make things happen. So see if you can let that state become what you are present to right now. It becomes your present experience. I can recall, I think I must have been 4 years old, discovering that I could think about things. Instead of just being totally in the present, I could think about what had happened. I could even think about what was going to happen. And I was so delighted and amazed by this newfound ability. Now you discover there's another adjustment you can make on this temporal little icon under the imaginal faculty. And this enables you to experience yourself before you incarnated in this physical existence. All of us that are here as human beings at some point made a free and conscious choice to continue on in our soul's journey to come all the way down into physical manifestation. It's like the wild west of the soul. So see if you can open to the experience of your being before you incarnated. And you may be sitting there going, well, I think it maybe would be like this or that, and just let go of all of that. And as I mentioned earlier, see if you can just open to, you have no idea of what's going to come. Allow yourself to open to what may be totally surprising, different than what you imagined or expected. And perhaps it won't be words or necessarily an image with form. Perhaps it'll be a feeling or a kind of light or vibration or sound, even an emotion. And even in this very different state of your being, there is that recognizability of the uniqueness of you that persists through all the forms in time and beyond. And this is beyond personality, beyond physical features. Feel that core essence of your being, experiencing yourself before you came to this life in the world. And as you connect with this, there may be a feeling of something is opening in you, emerging. You might feel energy, different parts of your body, perhaps your head, crown, maybe your heart, or solar plexus. And feel this essence of your being, the essence of your soul that persists before this physical life, during this physical life. And now you can adjust that little icon in the drop-down menu for the imaginal faculty to beyond this life, after you leave the physical realm. And we already exist on many levels of reality. So it seems like from one perspective, you're moving from here to there, but actually you've been there all along. Your focus has just been here. Now the physical awareness fades away and you can open to the experience of your being in the realm beyond this life, with all the wisdom that's been gained from your earthly experience. And once again, perhaps you feel something opening, arising, emerging. But there's a different flavor and quality to this compared to what emerged in your awareness of your being before this life, because something has been gained from your physical existence. That essence of your being has been tempered, and the light of your being has been evolved and transformed, enabling greater and greater capacities of relationship, understanding. Now there's a little button you hadn't seen before on the Imaginal faculty menu, and it says integration. So you click on it. And now allow yourself to experience an integration of all these different times before existence in the world, during, after, but experiencing all of that as you, all co-present. Your being spans seeming gulfs of time. And all of this brief experience in meditation has just been one little piece of the possibilities of what you can discover with your imaginal faculty. So once again, the imaginal faculty enables you to modulate your consciousness. It enables you to build a bridge or a scaffolding between your usual state and what you're experiencing. It enables you to integrate and have a story, have imagery, have a way of bringing back, a way of grounding this experience that enables you to stay opened up to these different parts, still going, not going back to where you started from. So what an amazing tool we all have at our disposal. And then bring your awareness back to wherever it is that you're sitting. But when you open your eyes, allow yourself to remain in this expansive state of being and not a spaced out state of being. This is very important. It's not that you want to come back to this very high state of being, which may be very enjoyable, but it's not grounded in life. So come back solidly grounded, as the message I always put on before the class starts. Take some time to become centered in the fullness of your being. And what I mean by that, the fullness of your being is your awareness of yourself existing at many different levels in circulation with each other. So go ahead and open your eyes when you're ready.
So we've really taken you in many different realms, different ways, perceiving this imaginal faculty, from the simple things that I wanted to show you that you do already, that you are using this faculty, that you are opening yourself to these other beings in different ways, to other experiences, that you have always been doing that. And everything you do as you go through your day, you are using your imaginal faculty. So you are already a master of doing this. And then to all of these higher realms and wonderful ways of manifesting that Ajahn is taking you to. And I hope then when you return to look at what it is that you do in your life, your relationship with your pet, your relationship with beings in your life, your way to bless others, the way that you see your religious ideology and the way that you practice in your churches and synagogues. All these things will gain a different meaning from this widening of your perspective and seeing all the possibilities that you have for your imagination, for your imaginal faculty. It won't ever be the same. So be good at the end of this class to think about some ways that we can expand the different ways that we have already been using our imaginations, what is possible for us.
So back to the notion of hotspots, which is related to what Ravani Ross said, just the ways in our ordinary life that we can do this. Well, in different traditions, there are in Christianity and I guess Buddhism, there are icons, there are mandalas, in yoga there are yantras, and these are either pictures or symbols that are in themselves a portal to a much deeper way of experience. So they are the traditional hotspots, these items. But in being able to see the sacred opening through the ordinary and being able to see anything as a potential portal to the sacred, so try this one on for size. Something that you just have your attention drawn to, imagine that that's really an icon or a mandala. And it could be a person. That person is an icon for a mystery much deeper than what you can see on the surface level of things. And that notion that everything is seeking to reveal itself to everything else. So, if I had just a foundational bit of guidance about spirituality for someone, it would be to help them find ways to discover their awakening through just their day-to-day life and their seemingly ordinary experiences. So if everything is the leaves of the trees or pages of that sacred scripture, well, what is a scripture? It's a story. So what are the pages of our sacred story, the allegory of our soul? It's all of our experiences. It's all of our ways of relationship. It's all of our joys and our sorrows and our discoveries and our frustrations. They're all part of that story, but that story only comes to life if we can be in that state of relational unity with what we're experiencing. So everything has a way of opening up to something more than what seems to be from a separated vantage point. And it sounds like, well, that sounds pretty amazing, and it sounds too easy. I always thought I had to do these complicated things to have spiritual realization. I had to do so many of this and that, and practices are wonderful and very helpful. So I'm not making light of those, but I think the most fruitful way of awakening is just that discovery and that realization of what's available all the time. It's available when we're awake. It's available in our dream life when we manage to have a more conscious dream. Sometimes they're just incredibly revealing and amazing, and sometimes perhaps seem more real than our waking state. That we have the capability of extricating ourselves from this totally narrowed, closed-in frame of reference of separation into one of just this co-experience with everything that we're in relationship with, and the joy of never-ending discovery of what happens in that interplay of light between us and what we're experiencing.
Well said.
Let's see.
Mm.
Okay. So what do we do with all this? Well, as we've said before, whatever is the deepest passion of your being, when you feel most alive in yourself with what you're doing and expressing, that is your way of manifesting the uniqueness of your soul in your life. And so it's very important to make an accommodation for that in your being. And yes, there may be many other responsibilities you have to take care of, and those are important too, but even your way of going about doing those, instead of thinking of them as, well, I've got to take care of all this and get it out of the way, and so then I'll be able to do that. You'll never get to where you want to get to if you think that way. But if you think of, well, everything like Ravani Ra was talking about, even when she was a little girl cleaning, feeling her connection with Mother Mary with that, that making whatever it is you do a sacred act in the way that you go about doing it. It doesn't mean you're going to go around just all spacey and high and holy. You want to be a very human, grounded, down to earth person with your personality and everything, but it's your way of Hazrat Khan said the aim of spirituality is to become a natural human being. Natural human being. It means expressing what our true nature is. And what our true nature is so much more than usually what we give ourselves scope to even know that exists in the first place, but give ourselves scope to be able to express, to live from that state of fullness of our being. And we all are capable of doing that. And it's not complicated. Sometimes we feel like, well, we've got to acquire more and more study in spirituality. So finally we'll have enough information to be able to get to where we're getting to. And maybe all you need is one little phrase or one little insight, and that's it. There's a story I've told before about a student in an Arabic school, and the teacher was teaching the Arabic alphabet, and the teacher thought, well, they're just really slow. They're not even able to get the first letter right. So teacher sent him off and says, well, you just go practice this letter and come back when you think you have it. And so the student went away for a year and came back, and teacher says, well, have you let me see what you've learned. And the student wrote this one letter on the blackboard and it cracked in half. I mean, the power of what came through of just being able to have that one focal point. So we don't need to accumulate information from every which way in order to have enough in our data banks to be able to become what we think of as realized or illuminated beings. We need to put into actuality something that we find along the way that is helpful for us in our own unique spiritual journey to become the fullest expression of who we are. So I know that both of us hope that some of you have been with us through many, many of these classes, which we are so happy to be able to do and share because we get all kinds of inspiration in preparing and presenting them. So we certainly hope that you've gained many things that will be useful to you, and in particular, a different way of relating to what your notion of spirituality is. And at the same time, many things that we're teaching are very, very advanced, and everyone's at a different place in their spiritual journey. So there may be many things that we present that some of you go, well, I just don't really get that. Don't worry about that. You don't need to. Take the parts that really fit for you and work with those.
That's good.
So I have a thought too before we turn the recording off. And this is an experiment because, and some people will be watching this recording after the live part tonight. But what I would encourage you to do, since we just have one more of this series on the imaginal faculty of the soul, is to email us questions that you have about anything that we've been presenting. And we'd love to get a whole bunch of questions from you. And perhaps if we get enough to make it really work, our next class will just be, we'll go through and take the questions. Pierre Z often does this when he's presenting. He collects questions and many times is very insightful and delightful. First of all, the kinds of questions, but also the answers that come.
And someone else will want to know what your question, the answer to your question was too. So it's helping them.
Yeah. So